All right, let's see if this works a little bit better. I have better bars. I had like full bars and then it just went down to nothing. So that was really annoying and weird. So we'll try it here. I don't know what was happening. It just could put it on me. Sorry, Matt. All right, let's try it again. All right, I see everybody on. All right, let's try it now.
Mercury retrograde in a hotel.
It is. It's wonderful. I had like full bars and then it just totally put it out. So I moved and it's fine. It's all fine.
Yeah.
I'm sorry though. I apologize. It's annoying.
You're
So yeah. So anyway, let's jump back in. So what I was saying is that, you know, I totally agree with you about not having to, we don't have to go through traumatic experience to awaken our psychic abilities. And in a way, it's almost like we do it for you as practitioners so that you don't have to.
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of like Psychic Witch, like that was the whole point of it, is that, you know, like anyone can awaken these things without, you know, being born a certain mystical way or like going through a horrible, you know, trauma. And then the reason I open with that story in Mastering Magic is the whole point is, you know, from being in such a powerless state, like that was the first example of how magic completely changed my life. And it has since. And, you know, I honestly do believe that it can change everyone's life if approached correctly. And I believe that through changing your life, you know, and empowering through my hope of empowering other people and changing their lives, having them change their lives, if that makes sense, giving them the tools to do it.
Yes.
Hopefully we can make change on a greater level, you know, on a worldwide level, because, you know, people need the power back because the world.
Yeah, and just not being afraid of it, right? Like just not being afraid of using your magic is so important. And I think that's a lot in Psychic Witch too, that you really talk about is just like harnessing what you have, using what's in you and not worrying about all this other stuff. Right. And so for people who, you know, haven't really dove in yet and are scared, what advice can you offer them?
I mean, it depends. I mean, like, first I would contemplate, like, well, why am I drawn to this? You know, even though I may be scared of it, why am I drawn to it? Meditate on that and then lean into it, you know? You don't have to dive headfirst into something that scares you. You can, like, acclimate yourself. Because once again, like, I don't think anyone should undergo trauma to, you know, have psychic abilities awoken. Plus, you know, psychic abilities take work, and that's one of the things that, like, I really try to highlight in my book. You know, so you're not going to be. Have you seen the movie Ghost? Yeah, so you're not going to have like a Whoopi Goldberg moment where suddenly, you know, spirits are like full on, you know, engaging you. You know, it's incremental, and it uses what you already have and builds on there.
Right. No, and I love that. And, you know, I think too, it's also good just to see like how you can use it in just every day, you know, like doing different spells and all of that stuff. It's awesome and it's fun, but you can just use it for simple things. Just even like your example of using it with your grandpa. Like you wanted a guy to leave you alone. So that's what you did to make him leave you alone, you know? And I love that. I'm reading the comments. You're looking as hot as ever, Matt. I love that. Now I'm going to embarrass you. I'm like, these comments are gold. So just because I know you and all that, I know you also practice a couple different traditions. So can you just explain those a little bit? And, do you have to be in a tradition? Can you just practice on your own?
Okay,
Just a
well,
little insight on
I
that.
have training and initiation in several different witchcraft traditions. Um, and they greatly influence my personal practice. So, just the ones that I've discussed publicly that are like publicly known is Laurie Cabot's Cabot tradition, Christopher Penzak's Temple of Witchcraft,
Mm-hmm.
Storm Fairy Wolf and Devin Hunter's and Chaz Bogan's Black Rose Witchcraft, and then Sacred Fires, which I'm a high priest in with Devin Hunter. Um, but
Okay.
with each of those traditions, I have everyone has the same framework. Like there's an agreement of what certain things are. So even little things like the Temple of Witchcraft, for example, like fires in the East,
Mm-hmm.
which is like very different for a lot of people. But we have an understanding
Right.
of what the framework is, and we have the same training, so we can be on the same page when doing magic. Um, so there is something to be said about training, particularly traditional training, and that could be under a mentor, that could be through a tradition. There's something to be said about like learning through books and learning through connecting with people. But at the end of the day, witchcraft we're all solitaries. It's a solitary path where we experience the mysteries ourselves and we do the magic ourselves. I liken it, and I know a lot of like witches don't particularly like this, but I compare it to church. So like, going to church isn't
Right.
necessarily in their cosmology going to make you go to heaven. You're coming together with people for a similar purpose, and usually that's like worship or like healing or whatever the church service is for.
Right.
But what gets you into heaven is your personal relationship. And witchcraft is very similar. Traditional witch, and Andrew Chumbley had a concept. He referred to this as the lonely road, that each witch has a lonely road. Only we can live our spirituality, just as we're born into the world alone and we will leave this world alone. The mysteries of magic, and both of those are mysteries in witchcraft. The mysteries, the experiential parts of it are all solitary. Um, Rambling a little bit, but
Right. No, you didn't. No way. But I don't really think you can ramble because everything you say is magnificent. So, and it's good to know because people don't know and people are afraid to ask, and they don't get time to have people, to talk to people and figure out like what it is. I'm just moving a little bit. I needed a pillow. My arm is getting tired. So I think that's, and I think it's another thing with Psychic Witch that's so important too. So what was your inspiration? Like, what made you write a
so
book?
honestly, Llewellyn reached out to me and was like, "Hey, when are you going to send us a manuscript?" And I, "Oh, you want a manuscript? Like, sure." Um,
Well,
so I initially pitched a different book, and they were like, "We think this is a bit too like niche. We don't think, we want more."
yes. Oh, I've gotten that answer myself. I understand
Yeah,
this.
well, it wasn't even about magic. It was about being
Right.
a professional tarot reader was like my idea. Things that I would have
Okay.
wanted to have read when I started reading professionally. They were like, "Well, go back to the drawing
Right.
board." So I sat and I thought, well, what is the book that I wish I had out of all the books I've ever read on witchcraft, which are a lot? What is the book that would have been the most helpful for me? And I came up with Psychic Witch, like this idea of putting the emphasis on energy, perceiving energy, and then manipulating energy. So that's just, and they were like, "Oh,
Yeah.
that idea, write it." So,
Yeah. Right. And I like how you also added the planets into it and like to use the energy of the planets with any of your workings. And I love that because then that's also getting people
right.
used to working with them, learning about the energy of the planets as well. So I absolutely love that because I do that myself a lot. So I'm like, oh
Well,
yeah, I
well,
like
I'm
this.
leading people somewhere. So Psychic Witch, like there's a lot of breadcrumbs of getting people familiar with working with certain things, because in mastering magic, we're going to jump in a little bit deeper, you know, and then um, books, we're going to dive deeper
Oh,
and
okay.
deeper and deeper into the work. But for me and for a lot of witches and magicians, like planetary energies are super important. You know, zodiacal energy is super important.
Yes.
Um,
Right, right. And
right,
even the phases of the moon,
right.
because that's, that's also a big thing that people don't, they know like, oh, full moon, new moon, but they don't really know what the other ones
Yeah,
are or
so
what they
in
do.
mastering magic, I do cover a lot of basics, but I try to approach it from different angles and also bring
Okay.
in new stuff, just sort of like how Psychic Witch brought a lot of new stuff people said to the table, like mastering magic does too.
Hmm.
So one of the things that has been a game changer for me is magical timing. And when people think magical timing, they think, oh, you know, I have to calculate a certain hour on a certain day, a certain time of year, um, which can be true.
Right.
And I do kind of show how to do that. But magical timing is, it
Hmm.
can be immediate to like grand. It could be like, well, what time of year is it? What time of day is it? What is the planetary hour? You know, what sign is the moon in? This, you know, what phase, the sun, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all these different possibilities of timing you can plug into to greatly increase your magic. And um, I write in a lot of metaphors because I teach in a lot of metaphors, and I have a really metaphor that I use
Right,
in
right.
Mastering Magic for that, which is to think of magic like you're bowling, right? So the bowling pins at the end are your
Okay.
spell, your goal, right? Like what you want. Every time you put
Hmm.
a magical
Okay.
timing, you're putting bumpers in. And the more you put it, the more you're
Okay.
kind of assuring that you're going to get a strike.
Yeah. You're
Yeah,
like
so it doesn't
narrowing it
mean that you
down,
need
right?
them. It doesn't mean you can't get a strike without them, but there's a greater chance that you're going to be successful when you're essentially, you know, tapped to your
Right.
cheat codes for math.
Yeah, and all your bumpers, and then you can't miss it. And I love that too, because that's also really helping you to like hyper focus on your intention or whatever it is that you want to bring forth. And, people tend to lose focus really easily. We're a bunch of goldfish. That's what it comes down to. So I love that idea too, because then it's like, no, you really need to pay attention to it and stay on board with
Yeah.
what you're
Well,
doing.
and you know, one thing that I had trouble with, and I know a lot of my students and like a lot of people that I meet have trouble with, is they try to jump into stuff too fast. Which is why Psychic Witch only goes so far into magic, you know, because it's like, you know, let's explore all of this. Mastering magic is very same.
Yeah.
In Psychic Witch, I sort of introduced the idea of like animism, you know, just as very light, like, you know, we believe everything has energy and
Right.
everything's alive. Mastering magic is about like partnering with everything in your spell, you know, because that's going to greatly um, enhance your results. You know, when you start learning to treat each
Right.
of your ingredients as a spirit and connecting with it, and you know, forming these relationships. And what it does is, you know, this is one of the things that tricks you into one of the mysteries of witchcraft, which is connection. And you know, I'm trying to because so in witchcraft, for the people listening who don't know, the Western witchcraft tradition tends to have a concept called mysteries with the capital M, and these are great truths that you cannot explain, but you have to experience to really understand it. It's sort of like, the best example would be like let's say sex, right? So before you have sex, you have an idea of what it is. You know, you may even have like an idea of what it feels like and what that experience is like. But until you actually have sex, you know, and you have that orgasm, you know, like, oh, it's
Right.
I get it. So when people talk about it, I understand. So the mysteries in
Right.
witchcraft are very similar because you can't really point to them. You can't really put them into words. You can only sort of try to guide people and like hope that they will stumble upon it themselves. There's a great, I don't remember if it's
Right.
Buddhist
Right.
or Taoist, but there's a great saying which is, the finger pointing to the moon is not the moon. And that is totally the mystery. You know? Or like Taoism,
Yeah.
the Tao that can be
Right.
named is not the Tao. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true too. And I think it's also just making it being relatable, like relating everything and seeing how it all flows together. And you can't, like you said, you can tell somebody all day long about it, but until they actually
right.
experience it, then it's not
Right.
fully real to
Well,
them,
and
you know?
you know, going back to this idea of
Right.
animism and really connecting with your tools and with the materia of your spell, like the candles, the herbs, the stones. You know, it takes us out of this kind of um, really Western, secular, materialistic, consumerist idea where we see these things as like ingredients, you know, and like I hate the word ingredients and I
Right.
avoided it at all costs in my new book. Because
Right.
like all of these have spiritual powers, and when you start viewing them as just something that you're using, you know, it brings you back into that kind of consumerist mentality. And for me,
Yeah.
witchcraft is a lot of it is about connection, and it's about like not negotiation, it's about exchange. So like connecting
Right.
with these things create an exchange, because sometimes, you know, before you throw the mugwort into the incense or whatever, the incense blend, you know, mugwort may have something to tell you, or it may have something that it wants in return. And that kind of helps kind of tap into that kind of mystery. I saw someone in the comments said hermeticism, and like totally, like I come from like a hermetic
Yeah.
witchcraft background. So like there is this idea that like I don't know, I'm rambling, so I, I,
No, that's we are here to listen to you talk, Matt. So you've also take advantage. Like, come on. No, but the thing is too is I think
right,
make keeping it simple, and not like you said with the consumerism and and we kind of even touched a little bit on this at Tide when we did our panel about just being a witch and not having to worry about if it's Instagram pretty or if it's this because it does lose
yeah,
its magic at that point, and it's not it looks great, but what does it actually mean to you? Does it mean anything to you, or were you rushing around trying to
right.
just
So
make it
it's
pretty?
funny because that's actually like a really long tradition in witchcraft. So like if they had Instagram back in the day, they would probably be doing the same thing. Like Alexander of the Alexandrian tradition. It's like one of the very first like British traditional Wiccan traditions.
Mm-hmm.
He's in a lot of documentaries, like doing magic and rituals with his covens and
Yeah.
showing spells and stuff. All of that's bullshit. Like all of it was made up simply for the cameras. You know, so people want to
Yeah.
know what was really going on. And I think like Instagram has become like that a lot, but not so much to hide what they're actually doing, but there has become this kind of emphasis on like how it looks over how it feels, you know,
Yeah.
and and I'm
Mhm.
all for things looking pretty, like, and I think that there is a power in aesthetic. There is a power in like, you know, even if it's
Yeah.
just psychologically of like, ooh, this feels magical, you know, but
Right.
right, but like, you know,
Exhausting.
you don't need to buy all the things. You know, a spell with just a very simple one ingredient, if you really connect with that ingredient, if you spend the time and energy, it can be more potent than, you know, something that you spent $100 on to like, you know, put together to do a spell. And it doesn't mean that, you know, the $100 spell isn't going to work, you know, but psychic witch, I'm very big on you can do magic with no tools. And I honestly believe, like, you know,
Mhm.
a glass of water, a simple candle, you know, maybe even like a little bit of background music. I think like someone who is like magically adept can do massive magic with just that. Like you don't need all the things. And in fact, I think it's a pitfall on the path
No.
of witchcraft that we're seeing, particularly now in this generation, which is getting hung up on how the witchcraft looks or how it's expected to look, versus what it's
Yeah.
actually doing and how it's feeling.
Right. Right. And and that's I totally agree with that too because just some students that I've had and you know, people I've worked with, I've seen their aesthetic. They are, it's beautiful, and I'll ask them to explain it or explain a piece of it. Or like I maybe saw a really cool looking candle. What's that candle? What is that candle? And they don't even know, you know, they're like, what do you mean? Which one? And they don't like, so, you know, like you know, when I'm doing spell work, I have a meaning for everything. And I'm constantly saying thank you to everything I'm using all the time. And that's one thing that one of the first things I say, like you know, you pick up a penny, say thank you. You use your birthday candle, doing a quick spell because you got to run, say thank you. Like putting that gratitude out in the universe, because then, you know, lets you know that you're ready to receive as well. And that's just that energy
Right.
exchange again with that magic. And that's so important. And know what you're using. Like, I mean, yeah, you're going to have some foofy things there. Maybe you don't know, you know, it's there because it looks nice. But for general, like the general stuff that you're using or the candles that you're using, make sure they have some sort of meaning to them. Something, you know, give them a job, you know, and that's what I say. Always give something a job. Because I'm like that. I mean, I feel like that too. Like I'll pick up a pillow, and obviously it's job. Like
Right.
I'll lay on it, but I'll be like, thank you, pillow.
No.
You know. So it is. It's so
So,
important.
so, some so Evo Dominguez Jr., who is an author and a teacher and like just an amazing human being, I always half jokingly say I want to be Evo when I grow up. But he talks about how like he will make coffee for people, and you know people will be like, "Oh, this is the most delicious coffee I've ever had. Like, what is it?" You know, and he'll be like, "It's Folgers," and they're like, "What?" And like the reason is because when he's like going to make the coffee, he's talking to the coffee beans, to the ground, and like, you know,
Right.
asking it to like, you know, be delicious and activate its full power and thanking it. And those things do make a difference. And, you know, even for the like non-magically minded, you know, we do as a secular society have this idea of like cooking with love. You know, and the idea that like a meal made lovingly somehow tastes different. Um, and it's
Right.
true, you know, and I think that goes into a very similar realm of really connecting with what you're doing and with what you're working with, instead of just seeing it as things that you're like throwing together to consume.
No, and it's true. And I think a lot of people do it not without even realizing. Like, how many, like, if you make a cake and you just happen to put like a heart in it, you know, as you're putting the icing on, or you're making sauce or something and you're stirring it, thinking about your family, and you're putting intentions
Right.
into these things. And I think some people do it subconsciously, but if you do it mindfully, you can really do magic just with the everyday stuff that you do. And I think that is almost more powerful than doing, I mean, the ceremonial magic is wonderful and it has its place and all of that, but sometimes just doing that simple stuff is like so much more magical, and it just gives you that boost you need, like the
Yeah, no,
everyday, you
totally.
know.
And I mentioned something at like the beginning of Psychic Witch. It's been a long time since I've read it now. It's been like years. But
I don't know how much you, I know how you remember it too, especially now
well,
writing
like I remember the
else.
mechanics of it, you know, but like I wrote something about how like, you know, someone grounding and centering for the first time with full earnesty, like they can radiate. And then like I've seen ceremonial magicians that are like high kumbas, like doing shit, and it's just like, you know, they're doing these fancy complex rituals, but it's almost like even the foundation
Right.
isn't there. There's no energy moving, there's no spirit.
It's just like, yes, yeah, yeah. I totally know what you're saying, and it is. It's so true. So now, you know, you talked about mastering magic a little bit. That's going a little bit deeper into it. So for people that are pre-ordering it and getting it ready, like getting ready to get it and everything, so they should probably read Psychic
I
Witch
would,
first, correct?
yeah.
That would probably be, yeah. Right. And what other things that are you building on in Mastering Magic that you touched on in Psychic
That I
Witch?
touch on in Psychic Witch. So when I wrote Psychic Witch, one of the biggest feedbacks that I had off of it was from individuals who have ADHD or who have aphantasia, which is the inability to form images on command in their mind's eye. And because of my own personal training, like these things were very like visual oriented. So I was
Mhm.
like, well, I want to figure this out. I don't know where to begin. So I started researching ADHD
Yeah.
and I started researching aphantasia. And then I reached out to friends that I knew that were diagnosed with these conditions. And I was like, all right, you guys want to be my guinea pigs? And they were like, yeah. So I came up with alternatives for people with ADHD who have a hard time just kind of focusing and concentrating, as well as people with aphantasia, which have difficulty visualizing. I sort of made loopholes to where you can get the magic to work for you. Without
Oh,
necessarily
wow.
going, so it's like sort of like a reworking. It's sort of like going to like, hey, psychic witch, I know these things were really hard. Here's a new way to enter alpha. Here's a new way to like get your brain waves where they need to be, like to meditate and not feel like it's an impossible task. So I tested it out with
Right,
them,
right.
and they um, most of them were successful. So the ones that were successful, I kept and I put in the book to try to help people. Um, I also
Okay.
have a big section on sacred space. So I go deeper into sacred space. So in Psychic Witch, sacred space, I start with the basic casting a circle, and a circle isn't here, but I go through the different shapes in magic and witchcraft and what they do energetically and why you would want to do them. Like, why would you want to cast a triangle or a square
Okay.
or a crossroads? And like what does how does that affect things? Like, why would
Like, but it's
right?
like, why does it help? Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, good. I love that because you can't find that. That's hard to
it is.
find.
Oh no, you.
I
Oh,
know.
there
All
you
right, we're back. We're back. We're
go. Yeah,
back for
thank
now.
you.
No. Yes.
Um,
Yeah. So we were just talking. I was just saying with the symbols and or the shapes and being able to use those because then that also. Now, do you touch on any
yeah,
sigil work or anything
yeah.
like that
So
in Master Magic?
I have a lot of contributors for this book because I wanted to. Uh, So I'm teaching magic in the book, like traditional spell casting, but I'm still using psychic ability as the main focus. Most of the
Mm-hmm.
spells are related to psychic ability in one way or another. So like enhancing your psychic ability or whatever. And one of the contributions I have is from Laura Tempest
Okay.
Croft, who wrote Sigil Witch.
Oh, love
Yeah, yeah.
her.
Oh my God, I'm a huge fan,
Oh,
friend.
she's
Uh,
amazing.
but I also go into other things. So I go into like the Witch's Wheel sigil making. I go into like Austin Osman Spare and his method of sigil making. Um, I cover about
Oh, okay.
everything that I could think of that I thought would be helpful for someone going to the next step of Psychic Witch. I was like 10,000 words
Mm-hmm.
over count when my publisher was like, you need to stop, you need to stop, you need to stop,
You need
you
to
know.
stop.
Um, but yeah, I have a lot of amazing contributors as well as my own spells in it. I have Madame Kamita, I have Juliet Diaz, Penzak, Hunter, Storm Fairy Wolf, of course. Who else? I have Lilith Dorsey. I mean, if you just go to my Instagram, like you'll see like contribute.
I know you've been posting them, yeah, which is so awesome because I also think it helps to make it like more mainstream and like, oh, it isn't just Matt doing it. There's all these people doing it. Like that's pretty cool, and just everybody's take on it, and that's always a big thing for me, even with tarot reading too. Like I love to go to other teachers, and I love to go to get other readings from people because everybody's perspective is so different, and I love to
Yeah,
see that.
and another thing that I go deeper in is like you were saying, like the planetary stuff. So, I touched on timing a little bit, but one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that I really explore in this book that I don't feel like is explored much, if at all, is like, well, what are the psychic, energetic aspects of these things? So, like, like we may know what like Venus means in magic or astrology, but like, what's it mean? Like, what does it do for your psychic ability when you tap into it? You know, what do the different moon phases do? What do the different Sabbats, you know, like the wheel of the year, like different times of the year, like what's that doing to the average human psychic ability, and as well as mediumship, because everything does sort of work in cycles, and that's another one of the mysteries in witchcraft, is this sort of like cycle.
Hmm.
You know, so
Right.
I also share. So a lot of people think this is really funny, but like when it comes to money magic, a lot of people go to Jupiter, right? So what I do is I break down what are the energetic archetypes of each planet, because I don't go to Jupiter for money magic, and that surprises a lot of people. I go to Venus because Venus is the energy of like come, it's draw, it's
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. Like, come hither,
money
money.
in before I can expand it, you know. So
Right. No, that does make a lot of sense. Totally. And, again, it's just getting people familiar with these things and using them in their everyday. Now, what advice do you have for people that want to work with deities, gods and goddesses, and all of that? Because that can be
uh,
overwhelming too for
um,
people.
you know, for the average reader, I don't really teach that yet. That eventually will be a book, but right now I'm very
Hmm.
focused on,
Right.
because I don't have a general rule of thumb belief for everyone across the board. So across the board, what I'm teaching is that, the most important thing is to get in contact with the spirit within you, learn to connect with the things
Yeah.
around you, and to connect with like your higher
Hmm.
self, and some concept, some broad concept of like um, God with a capital G, or spirit or Titan or whatever, your
Right.
witchcraft tradition says the word is. And I think that as these things happen, deities are going to come into your life,
Right.
when they see someone doing the work and being earnest about it and learning how to connect with different spirits. And like I said, I consider everything spirit. Like I consider like this iPhone that I'm speaking into a spirit on some level. So when you can start to
Right.
see the spirit and
Hmm.
everything and build those connections and build those relationships, I think that like deity will naturally sort of come in. And like there's also like it's just such a complex question, because then there's also the idea of like
Right.
well, which deities, which pantheons, are they from like a closed practice, is it open, what are your feelings on that, and a lot of this is personal, and takes a lot of kind of diving into, and I don't think we have a lot of
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's a whole nother one with better internet. But your answer though, I think was good, and it's really about learning
time.
about yourself and even treating yourself as one right now and learning about yourself and how you operate and work and then moving on. And I totally am with you too that they will find you, because I've definitely been like, you know what, don't rush it. Just keep practicing, keep learning, keep doing what you're doing. They'll find you. And, again, we tend to be impatient and people don't like that answer. But it is. And you know what? I feel like that you're going to get a better practice and a deeper, better relationship with whatever you decide to work with when you do it that
I
way.
agree. um
Yeah. Right. It is. It's definitely, it is. It is.
yeah.
That's what it is. So what other, what else do you want about mastering magic do you want us to
um
know about?
so the title, so psychic witch, and this book
And the
too,
book cover.
I tend to get my information from dreams. And it's really weird. It's like I get instructions on everything. It happened that way with Psychic Witch, it happened with this book. So before I knew the title, one of the things that kept coming through was I knew that it had to be in verse from the first book. I was told it has to be black on white instead of white on black. And Moth was super,
Right.
super adamant about being the sort of like mascot of this book.
Right. Like the owl was
Right,
for
right. And
psychic
then,
witch, right?
and then I got the
Okay.
title Mastering Magic. And I was, I was like, okay, well, like, I love that title, but it's super intimidating, right? Like, Mastering Magic. Plus, Paul Hewson in the 60s had his, or 70s had his classic Mastering Witchcraft. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't want him to hate me, you know? But it was, and I'm sure he doesn't, but uh, all my interactions with him have been super nice. But I had this idea of like having to really sit and think about like, well, what is mastery to me, and what is mastery, and when it relates to witchcraft, when it relates to these sort of spiritual things. And for me, because I don't believe that there is an end when it comes to witchcraft. So when it comes to these sort of
Yeah.
occult mysteries, there is no end point. You can reach like adepthood to some degree, but even that I don't see really as mastery. So for me, I don't consider myself a master of magic. In terms of knowing everything that there is to
Mhm.
know, being able to wield the grandest magic that there is, but I consider myself a master of my
Right.
magic, of my path, of my lonely road, and how I connect to it. And that's the main theme of this book: is how you connection again, how you connect to your own magic. And that's why figuring out these alternatives to ADHD and aphantasia for these exercises was so important to me, because if you're working spells, whether it's a formula or a format, and it's just not working for you, if it's just you just aren't personally connecting with it, like that's such a waste of time. It's a lonely road. The magic has to work for you. So um,
Mhm.
that was a big sense. So many people were like, aphantasia, ADHD, what do I do? This book. I was like, well, this is
Right.
definitely something that
Right.
I feel I have to tackle. And I'm hoping that just like my my friends who I'm lovingly referring to as my guinea pigs, um, they were able
Right.
to
Right.
utilize that successfully. I'm hoping that it'll help others successfully, like enter these altered states of
Right.
consciousness, or be able to like do the meditations with the visualizations without necessarily like seeing
Mhm.
the.
Seeing the picture, yeah. And I feel like too that that was calling to you for a reason. There's somebody out there that really really needs it, so now that you're putting that out for them, and I always, again, it's that connecting, and it all comes back full circle, and I really love that you're looking into that. And because one I have four boys, so one of my sons is super ADHD, so I'm gonna give it to him and see what he does with it. He's gonna be my guinea pig now, because it really is. It is a thing. And knowing, I do know a lot of practitioners that do suffer from these things, and it's very frustrating for them, and it makes them not fully in their power. So I love that you are like, no, you can be in your power too. Come on with me. Let's
And
do
so like
this.
that was also one of the reason I asked for many contributors, because some of the contributors, their magic looks nothing like my own. Like Benabel Wen, she this beautiful Taoist
Yes.
spell where you're calling upon like the Queen of Heaven. Like that's not my magic, but that's her magic. And I'm trying to show that like
Right.
magic isn't
Right.
cookie cutter. It's to master the magic of your life, you have to personally resonate with it. You have to connect with it, and you have to find the power in it. Or else it's just you're going to be wasting time and doing a bunch of things that you aren't getting,
Mm-hmm.
the results that you want. And you want results with our spells
Right.
and our witchcraft. But there's no point in doing them
Yes.
other than maybe Instagram pictures. you know.
Right, right. And then again, that's not helping. And I love though too that, you know, I feel like that you just really focus on finding your own power, and no matter what you have, I mean, you can have anything going on, and there's something that you can work around it, or don't worry about what they're doing, do it this way. But I'm going to give you examples just so that you can maybe take what you want from everything and create your own practice, right? I think that's, pretty safe to say that, and it's that is empowering too. And when we empower others, we empower ourselves. So I think that's awesome. And, you know, and it's all about teaching. We're all here to serve and help and all of that, you know?
Yeah, and like I said, like, you know, there is no end goal either. And that's one of the things. There's no reason to rush because, you know, there is no end goal to anything. Like
Right.
even in, you know, like witchcraft traditions, like, you know, when you reach the final initiation, you're just equal to everyone else. That's not the end. You know, you're still learning on a personal path and having
Right.
experiences. Um, so I don't know. I really you know, this resonates for
No,
people, that like it helps them, that I help bring some kind of new vantage points of like looking at some of these magical concepts that either aren't explored or are taken for granted. Um, you know, I talk about in my
yeah.
book, like at the very beginning, you know, I'm like, how to use this book kind of a thing. Because it's much harder to teach magic properly in book form than it is through like mentoring, because you have to be linear.
Right.
You know, you can't be like, let's go back and do this thing. So what I suggest is I'm like, as we go along and you do the spells, like do them. Like as we keep moving on, you're going to be learning new concepts that are bringing new depth to those spells. So, you know, the first time you cast it while reading versus when you're done with the book and go back to cast that spell, like you're going to have a different relationship and a different understanding of that spell. You know, but I encourage both. I encourage the sort of, you know, experimental aspect of it, as well as, you know, after you understanding it, experiencing it from that point of view. Particularly since most of the magic in the book, as I
Right.
said, is
Mm-hmm.
focused on like awakening psychic abilities. You know, it's supposed to be the other side of the coin of Psychic Witch. Psychic Witch was all about like tapping into your psychic abilities so that you can reverse engineer that to enhance your magic. This is all about like learning magic so that
Right.
you can enhance your psychic ability, because they do work in tandem. It is sort of like a not a dance, but a conversation. That's how I usually liken it. So like I usually liken magic as like speaking,
Yeah.
the
No, I love that.
projection
I love
of
that.
energy, and listening is the psychic ability, and you need both to be able to have a fluent conversation. That sounds a little ableist. Let me change that. When you have both, it's easier to have a quick conversation. But that doesn't mean, for example, that you can't do magic if you absolutely are not tapped into psychic ability, or that you can't, you know, tap into your psychic ability if you aren't
Mm-hmm.
practicing witchcraft. It's just my firm belief that like both really kind of strengthen that conversation, and that conversation is with the universe, is with everything around us. And that's why, you know, going back to this idea of connecting with things is so important, and it's such an underlying mystery in witchcraft. I'm,
Yeah. No, and you know, and no, and just that and that. I don't know what else am I going to say. You say all the things and they're all perfect. But I think too, you know, it's so important that these books are here to help you to like build your base, like to build your psychic base. You know, so that you have that foundation that you need to take it to the next level or wherever you want to go with it. And and I think too, it's important for people to realize too that your thoughts, feelings, all these things are going to change, because how I practice witchcraft now to even 10, 15 years ago is different. So don't be afraid to change and adapt as you change and adapt, just making sure it's true to you and it's not just like a
right,
phase.
right.
You
And,
know what
you
I
know,
mean?
I'm very big on experimenting and encouraging experimentation. For a
Mm-hmm.
while there, like, and it still is, but like, people were going through like a tradcraft like fad, you know, where it was sort of like anything that's not tradcraft is like silly, you know, and like I love trad. You know, I
Yeah,
love
I
Gemma
get that.
Gary, I love Three Hands Press, all of that stuff. But with that
Mm-hmm.
came a lot of people being like, I don't cast circles. I never cast circles. I don't need to cast circles. And I'm like, well, you know, have
Yeah.
you cast a circle? Like, you know, like experiment, you know, even if you come away from it being like, yeah, I don't like to cast circles, you know, like at least you can take the two on more than an actual intellectual level, but an experiential level, and see what the
Right.
difference is and what your results
Right.
differences are. And that's one of the reasons also why I have the other alternatives to casting a circle in this book to explore and experiment with.
Right. And you know, and that even goes back to what you were saying in the beginning with being
Yeah.
able to relate to it. You know, so if you try it, you can't relate to it. And I, you know, and that's a big thing I always tell people too. Like even if it's like feels a little like, this is kind of weird. I don't think I like it. At least read about
Yeah.
it. Try it at least once. It's so that you can actually honestly say it wasn't for you, and in not letting maybe a limiting thought or belief stop you, because sometimes that happens and there's reasons and we got to work past them, but try it and just see what happens, and if it doesn't work for you,
Yeah. It's
then move
like
on to
green
the
eggs and
next thing.
ham. You got.
Yes.
Yeah, and this goes back into the, I'm very adamant. My teachers were adamant about this, and I'm adamant as well, that witches do not believe. We are not necessarily in terms of blind faith. We don't just believe things because we're told to. We don't believe that certain spells work just because we're
Right.
told to. We experience them, and then we know that they're either true or they're not true for us. So witchcraft is about knowing. It's about experiencing. It's not so much about like
Right.
just believing in something because you were told. Witchcraft will always have that kind of streak of heretical rebelliousness.
Exactly. Ask questions, ask all the questions even if they don't like
Yeah.
it. Definitely, definitely. All right, well, I think they're like turning up the music so we're at an hour, so we'll have to come back when Mastering Magic comes. We'll have you back on, but where can
Yeah.
you
So
tell
you can
everybody
find
where
me
to
on
find you?
Instagram. I'm on here. I ordered craft.
Maybe they're in. Yay! I know, I'm so excited for it. Well, thank you for so much for coming on and being patient with me and my
Okay.
bad internet.
Well, we'll schedule for Terry to be direct
But
next time we're connecting.
yeah, see, I wasn't paying
Well, we
attention.
scheduled
That
it
that's
so
what
far
happened.
in advance
That's what
that
happened.
yeah.
Yes. No, we will. We'll talk again soon. All
You
right.
too.
Thanks a
Bye.
lot. Have a good night. All right. Bye. Bye, everybody.